Nintendo fans say we need new IP. We say we want cheaper games, but every time we get either, even both, there's a campaign to hate on the shining examples of those desires. This is true for a lot of Nintendo games and will probably remain true for future generations, but the most recent case study, dragxdrive, Nintendo's brand new $20 team-based wheelchair basketball game for Switch 2, highlights the ongoing hypocrisy in the Nintendo community. Like clockwork, here we are being presented with all of the above on a silver platter with dragxdrive, and look at how people online are talking about it. The most prominent complaints I've seen online in the Switch 2 era are the price points for games like Mario Kart World, the general increase of the standard price for video games, which has increased to $70, and now people are complaining that a game for less than a third of that price doesn't seem to be worth playing at all. A lot of people are throwing around the Solus label. A lot of people are comparing it to Splatoon or even ARMS, and I think those ironically are apt comparisons, but not in the way they are being framed, but rather due to the fact that they really just point to an unrealistic expectation that Nintendo fans in particular have for games they embrace. Everything needs to be everything for everyone. Splatoon, for example, was able to find widespread acceptance. Notice I didn't say success. This is an important distinction I make for a reason that will become clear in a bit, because although it is a game that is primarily intended to be played in a competitive environment with other people, it has strong enough single-player content that gamers online allow it to be championed as a full game worthy of success. And it's not just that, it's importantly Splatoon's choice to cater to people that don't want to adapt to its default experience, something dragxdrive, at least at present, refuses to do. First, I want to preface this by saying I think wanting Nintendo to provide traditional controls in the interest of accessibility is totally justified and valid, especially in regards to dragxdrive in particular, as it is a game that at the very least is perceived as, whether that perception was intentional or not, a game where you control people in wheelchairs. That said, what I don't think is valid and is arguably a lot more prominent in the discourse is gamers' derogatory continued refusal to experience games in ways that deviate from their default comfort zone. There is a lot going on in dragxdrive's control scheme, and that is where the depth and much of the fun lies, which I'd assume is intended to emulate the fun of actual sports. And I'll make a quick aside to address the "this game hurts to play" crowd at the risk of having a "you're holding it wrong" moment. I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, because many of them are playing the game on camera, that a lot of these people are playing this game in insane ways that aren't actually necessary. You don't need to slam your controllers on a desk. You don't even need a desk. I haven't even tried playing dragxdrive hunched over my desk a single time. My entire time with the game since the global jam sessions has been spent with me sitting with my default ass posture and using my legs as a surface to control the game. I have had multiple sessions that lasted 2 to 3 hours and felt no different from the way I feel after doing a moderate amount of movement, i.e., I don't know, playing Wii Sports. These people talk about playing dragxdrive like it requires you to punch bricks or something. Insanity. Anyways, hot take in gaming spaces, I know, but moving can be fun. And more than that, in this game in particular, it can add its own take on what challenge in games looks like. Everything in dragxdrive feels like it's trying to promote intention. Some things are more intuitive than others, to be sure, but all of it feels designed to prevent the game from being a waggle fest. You don't move faster by physically moving your arms more or faster. You move faster by fully and consistently completing the wheeling arc. You won't be able to consistently play defense by simply flailing your arms around or just mindlessly ramming into opponents. You need to be intentional about your angles and lines and timing. If this was all done with buttons and sticks, that depth gets flattened and the game would instantly become a mash fest. The controls are part of what makes the game challenging in a similar way to how physical ability is is what makes real world sports challenging. And in the interactive medium that is gaming, that is no different than motion inputs in fighting games, or inverted sticks in flight sims, or even the default controls for most shooters. The controls are fundamental to the game's design, and I think that justifies them deciding against making a traditional alternative control scheme. Gamers will frame this as a gimmick, and I don't disagree, but that's only because by definition it is. So are the aforementioned control schemes that people do accept. So is everything gamers associate with gaming. Literally anything used to entice people to buy a product is a gimmick. But I'm sure we're not ready to have that conversation. I've tried. Compare this to ARMS, a game that is much closer to drag and drive in the level of prioritization of its core value proposition, although even it had options for traditional control schemes. This too was a game people wanted to hate from jump. Most loudly, it received the same criticism drag and drive is getting, that it lacked enough content tailored to single player only gamers. I know from experience, the second you suggest the inverse in a single player only game, regardless of scale, it'll be World War III. People that don't have friends to play games with or have some sort of aversion to playing games with others carry themselves like every game should cater to them. I vehemently disagree. Social gaming has value. Multiplayer games have the potential for endless playability solely based on their multiplayer nature. For a game like ARMS and now Drag and Drive, all you need is for the game to be fun to play and designed to accommodate low skill floors and high skill ceilings. Unlockables can be cool or whatever, but in no way should we seriously be entertaining the idea that having a limited amount of them makes a game focused on playing with others any less valuable, especially when the game in question is a budget title in the first place. It's so much easier to just try a game and try to accept it for what it is rather than try to force your will on it at a price point this low. That's not even settling. That's just trying new things with little risk. If people spent $70 to try something that they later felt misled about, fair. But Drag and Drive isn't that. This is a fun, multiplayer-focused, experimental title made by a team of less than 20 Nintendo devs that just had an offbeat idea for a new game and were afforded the ability to make it a reality. And that's very far from how people are choosing to talk about it, even when they acknowledge the fact that they think it's fun and controls well. Creators and journalists just try to have the most agreeable opinion. They know gamers don't like new things almost as much as they don't like socializing or moving, so it's a layup to ding this game for leaning into those things. That's whack, and I'll tell you right now, that's not what I try to do here. I don't care if you agree with me. I make these videos to have conversations with reasonable people that can grasp nuance and perspective. The goal is to be understood, not to be right, because what does right even mean? All of that said, this game certainly isn't for everyone, and here's where I can level with people that are painting Drag and Drive in a negative light. To a degree, you can't account for taste. A sports game is going to be an especially potent flavor of nerd repellent. If it ain't Mario or Mies, there's a slim chance that you're gonna win a lot of Nintendo fans over. And I say this as someone who, while I have previously bought and played sports games in the past and plan to do the same when future Madden and NBA 2K titles come to Switch 2 and realize they need to be feature complete to actually succeed, it's not something I typically do outside of these more arcadey takes on the formula. I get that this being a basketball game is a non-starter for some on that basis. That said, it's disingenuous at best to portend that Drag and Drive isn't a hop, skip, and a jump away from being a Mario sports game. And even with taking that into consideration, I still don't fault people that are discounting the game for this reason. That said, personal taste then being tied to a game's quality is where I take issue. The Metacritic page for this game is riddled with reviews that amount to "the game works well, the game is fun, but the game isn't for me, 6 out of 10. And I think it's insane to pin that to a game given the assumption that people who are interested in what Nintendo has been very transparent about offering are then led to question its quality based on takes from critics who from the time the game was revealed knew they wouldn't like it. Even more niche and, in my opinion, insane than that, gamers are now arguing Drag and Drive isn't iconic enough. or that to them, the game lacks personality, which really feels like an overtly vague moving of the goalpost. Nintendo is genuinely the only game developer in existence that people expect to produce icons with every new game, regardless of scope. The rest of the industry is allowed to mass produce generic space marines, high fantasy dwarven paladin warlock priest, and just straight up normal ass white dudes. And those games go on to become Game of the Year contenders. And again, even being iconic isn't enough for these people. Keep in mind that ARMS is packed to the brim with iconic designs that ooze personality, but these same people discarded that game until it fit this new narrative to hate on the next new idea they didn't want to embrace. These are just tired talking points that seep into how commenters online talk about every game as if it's gospel and not just a prolonged game of telephone. And I'm just tired of this merry-go-round and am begging for a new ride, please. None of this is to argue dragxdrive is perfect. There's aspects of it that frustrate and annoy me. It's fair to voice what you don't like about a game. It's even fair to me to know and express that said game isn't for you and to skip it on that basis. The problem is assuming that a game that isn't for you, or even worse, very well may be for you in most but not every little way you arbitrarily expect, therefore lacks value for everyone. This is a concept that nerds understand when it comes to polarizing games they love. Like I said before, you'll hear them defend single player only games with their dying breath. Don't get me started on how fiercely people cling to games with turn-based combat. All of these niches have a right to exist in the formats where they're most suited. Budget titles should be allowed to be laser focused on executing on an idea without people pretending that more targeted approach makes them worse games. Splatoon is a phenomenal game, and its success is just an underscoring of that statement. ARMS is a phenomenal game that, despite it being targeted at a smaller niche, still wildly succeeded in that arena. I think dragxdrive is capable of the same and could have a way easier ride to getting there if every pundit online didn't make it their mission to mistake a game not catering to their need to be centered with a game genuinely missing the mark on what it needs to be to find and satisfy an audience. I will be putting many hours into playing dragxdrive with friends and randoms alike. I've already enjoyed learning and mastering its controls in the few hours I've gotten to play so far, and am excited to play as much as I can in the future. It's not a game I see myself wanting to marathon or anything like that, but for $20, I feel great about where I see it fitting into my gaming time, which will likely be 2 or 3 hours of some competitive gaming while keeping the body moving every now and then. For $20, I don't need a forever game. I'm positive that there will be people that embrace it even more and will make it their forever game. There will be people that make dragxdrive a primary game in their rotation, in the same way my oldest niece's favorite game was 1-2 Switch, or how I have friends that mainline ARMS without fail. That won't be everyone, but for some people, it will be everything. And that is all that matters for games like this. Hell, every game. Watch this video about another Switch 2 game being overlooked online. Thank you to paid members over at shop.watchredirect.com like Trev L. Steinberg for making this video possible. Hit the link in the description to join them in the comments of every video and in receiving physical and digital perks.